Okay, so right now there are plenty of huge names in the 2025 draft at the quarterback spot, including Cam Ward, Quinn Ewers, Jackson Dart, and Shedeur Sanders. But let's go back to the offseason. There were a couple of NFL scouts and a lot of media outlets who were hyping up a random quarterback from the Big 12 to potentially be a first-round pick. He was built like Cam Newton, and if he just had a fine-tuned big-time senior season, he could potentially be a first-round pick. I mean, these are not my words, as this was all over the internet and all over mock drafts, as Donovan Smith was getting first-round attention as a quarterback. Unfortunately, Smith not only ended up being a bust, but one of the most disappointing quarterbacks in all of college football, and went from a potential first-rounder to now not even on the NFL draft radar. In today's video, I want to go through the story of Donovan Smith. We're going to talk about how he went from an underrated 3-star recruit to a guy with a ton of draft potential, and why things did not work out this season. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about what happened to Donovan Smith. Okay, so in order to understand what happened, we first need to go back in time. Donovan would end up becoming the third college football player in his household, as his dad was an option quarterback at Southwest Missouri State and was the Gateway Conference Player of the Year. He was also 5'7". DeAndre's older brother, Ryan Smith, was a slot receiver and return man while he was at Duke. Apparently he gets his height from his mother's side, as Donovan Smith ended up being a lot taller than that. But he had an interesting story growing up, as his dad ended up becoming a college football coach, and as of the time of this article being written, which was probably about 2020, he had moved 12 times in 9 different states for the college football job. This would prove to make it difficult to keep his kids in one place. DeAndre Smith said, quote, "Once the kids started to get to high school, our thought was it'd be better to get them in one spot and not bounce around, and also my wife loves Vegas, so it worked out great." Eventually, Donovan would arrive at a prestigious high school known as Bishop Gorman. He was an incredible athlete, but circumstances made things difficult for him to see the field as a quarterback. Smith ended up having to play other positions, as he said, quote, "It was the best thing for the team. We had a really good quarterback, and the coaches felt like it was the best fit for our team. I'm an athlete, and they put me at wide receiver in a 7-on-7 scrimmage, and I did well. So the coaches thought I could become a threat at the position and help the team." At Gorman, he ended up having a lot of potential, but as I said, he was stuck. He was stuck behind a blue-chip quarterback by the name of Micah Bowens, who ended up becoming a 4-star who flamed out at both Oklahoma and Penn State. Because of this, Smith would end up sliding over to wide receiver, where he caught 49 passes for 800 yards and 8 touchdowns. But right before his senior season, without ever starting a game at quarterback, he would have to leave for another state. His dad ended up taking the job at Texas Tech as the running backs coach, which brought about a sudden move to Texas. But going back in time, his recruitment had started a couple of years prior. At the time, Utah State head coach Matt Wells and offensive coordinator David Yost spotted Donovan before anybody else did. They were at Utah State when they decided to offer Donovan a scholarship at a camp after his freshman year of high school. For 3 days, they went back and forth on the phone, and they were kind of skeptical. They were going to offer a kid who had never played varsity football, but ultimately, they thought he'd be coming through the pipeline and would become pretty good, so it sounded promising enough for them to offer that scholarship. They ended up actually prioritizing Donovan as well, as he said at the other colleges they just wanted to offer him, but they didn't really follow up or keep in touch. He said that Coach Wells and Coach Yost kept in touch with him for about 3 years, so that, combined with the family atmosphere, is why he chose to go to Texas Tech. He committed to the Red Raiders, and this was obviously right down the street from home because his dad was there. He chose them over offers from Utah State, Nevada, and San Diego State. He ended up having to go to Friendship High School, and when the coach first saw this quarterback come in, he was blown away. Coach Northcutt said, quote, "He came in and was such a good kid. Me personally, I was thinking, man, is he really a good kid?" Sure enough, he was. Friendship was a struggling team, as they went 0-10 and 3-7 the previous 2 seasons, but in their 1 year with Donovan Smith, they went 7-4. He passed for 3,100 yards with 26 touchdowns, and also ran for nearly 500 yards and 14 scores on the ground. Smith towered over people, and some thought he had NFL potential if he could be developed right. He ended up measuring in at 6'4.5", and remember, his dad was very short, and he was also up to 200 pounds. He would probably need to put on weight, though, to his frame, but DeAndre Smith said, quote, "He's just going to get bigger and bigger. Kids get a lot more confidence when they get more muscles, and he can't wait to get with Coach at Tech, and once he does that, he will probably be a 235-pound guy, and he'll be that big when it's all said and done." As I said, his height came from his mother's side of the family, but his height wasn't the only appeal. He also had a huge arm, and then he combined that with an ability to extend plays. He could also keep his eyes downfield, keep plays alive, and keep his brain in play. Many big-time Texas Tech fans and scouts had spent years examining players, and many thought that Smith could have an opportunity to be the quarterback of the future for the Red Raiders, and that he could even start as a true freshman. Okay, maybe they were a little bit ahead of themselves, but he ended up being solid. According to 24/7 Sports, Smith was a 3-star recruit, the number 49 athlete, and the 890th best player in the class of 2020. So how would Donovan end up doing at Texas Tech? Well, let's take a look. All roads lead to this year's. The wild ride to New Orleans is almost over, and the big game is just around the corner. For fans looking to cash in on this year's, MyBookie is where it's at. They've packed in promotions, props, and features that make betting on this event not only exciting, but also profitable. So here's the playbook for this year. There's a couple of props that you can bet on, which include how long it'll last, if the singer will nail every word or have a ton of slip-ups, and heck, even the color of this year's Gatorade. Yeah, MyBookie has tons of options, and if you bet, it'll make it more fun. There are a couple of options including boosted parlays, the money bag, squares, tiered bonuses, and live betting and streaming. When you decided what you're going to pick, go over to MyBookie and use my promo code Fisher50 for your first bet. Celebrate your Sunday by having a good time with MyBookie and get your game plan ready. If you're one of those people that thinks the NFL was rigged for the Chiefs, you can now use MyBookie to put your money where your mouth is. If there's one thing for certain, we have no idea what's going to happen during the big game this year, but be sure to head over to MyBookie to make this Sunday a little bit more entertaining. Thank you to them for sponsoring today's video. So when Donovan arrived in 2020, he would not end up seeing the field at all. He did not appear in any games, but in 2021, he would start to get a couple of opportunities. He'd eventually get inserted into the starting lineup in 2021, where he ended up going for 192 yards and a touchdown in his first significant action against Oklahoma, and then had 3 touchdowns in his first career win over Iowa State. He also ended up playing in games against Baylor and Mississippi State in their bowl game, and in total, he finished with 1,200 yards with 7 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Going into 2022, he'd now be battling it out once again, and with both Tyler Shuck and Baron Morton also in the quarterback room, Smith would have his work cut out for him. Smith would end up starting the first half of the season, as he threw for 4 touchdowns in a win over Murray State, had 3 scores in an overtime loss to Houston, and then also started 3 straight ranked games against NC State, Texas, and K-State. From there, his role was diminished by the end of the season, so he would look to transfer for the 2023 season. With Houston losing their star quarterback Clayton Tune to the NFL, the Cougars would have an open spot at the quarterback position, and in year 1 in the Big 12, Smith could have an opportunity to jump to a different school and potentially start right away. Smith would end up winning that starting job in 2023 and actually had a pretty decent year. I dare to say it was really good. He ended up having 233 yards and 2 touchdowns in their first win against UTSA, and then followed it up with 5 touchdowns and a loss to Rice. Yeah, Houston was off to a tough start. Yeah, that was not a good loss for them. He would luckily bounce back a couple weeks later, though, as he'd helped them get a win over Sam Houston State, and then he started to play really good football. He had 4 touchdowns against Texas Tech, 5 total touchdowns in a win against West Virginia, and then 3 touchdowns against a top 10 Texas team. While they would get steamrolled 41-0 against K-State, Smith would kind of fall off towards the end of the season, as he would struggle horribly with turnovers, but still had a decent showing against Baylor before 3 straight losses to Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, and UCF. Smith would only end up winning 3 games in his first year at Houston, and in total the Cougars went 4-8 and struggled mightily in their move up to the Power 5. They went 2-7 in the conference, and Dana Holgorsen was fired after 4 years there. This was technically the longest tenure of any Houston head coach in 20 years, but Holgorsen ended up being a little bit of a failure for them. Obviously, there were a couple of bright spots, as they had 2 receivers who ended up becoming top 10 in the portal, one of which was Matthew Golden, and then they also had Smith. Smith ended up starting 12 games, passing for 2,800 yards with 22 touchdowns and 13 picks, which was kind of high, and then also had 428 yards on the ground and 6 scores there. This is where all the NFL potential started. Everybody's always trying to find the next Patrick Mahomes or Jordan Love, and it looked like scouts were starting to go all in on Donovan Smith. There are multiple mock drafts that had him as a first-round pick, and according to Pro Football Network, he was projected as a first-round pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, where he was slotted to go at pick number 22 to the New York Jets. They said, quote, "Aaron Rodgers will get a chance to redeem his tenure in New York in 2024, but after that, the long-term outlook is unclear. Whether Rodgers stays or departs, Donovan Smith could be an optimal successor with his size, his arm, off-platform ability, and flashes of precision." Okay, yeah, basically he was seen as a guy who looks like an NFL quarterback but would need 1 more year to really prove it and would have to improve immensely. New head coach Willie Fritz from Tulane would hope to get the most out of him, as he had just sent Michael Pratt off to the NFL. Donovan Smith ultimately would have a poor season, though, as it was evident right away, throwing for 135 yards with 2 interceptions in a loss to UNLV, and then also struggling in a road game against Oklahoma. He did have 3 touchdowns in a win over Rice, but that would be his best performance of the season. He failed to have touchdowns in his next 3 games against Cincinnati, Iowa State, and TCU, and then he had 3 interceptions on the road against Kansas. Houston was one of the worst teams in the country to start out the 2024 season, and Donovan Smith never played a meaningful snap after that Kansas game. Chris ended up taking over as the starter for the remainder of the year, and things went so poorly that Smith never regained an opportunity, and I literally have no idea what he is doing now. They're going to bring in Connor Weigman from Texas A&M, but in 2024, Smith finished with 867 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 8 picks. He did have 3 rushing scores, but man, it was extremely disappointing for Donovan, and I have really no idea what went wrong. Houston didn't have a whole lot of talent, they had a first-year head coach, and they just were behind in the Big 12 in a lot of areas. They had lost their top 2 receivers, and just pretty much everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Donovan Smith always had struggled with turnovers in his career, but things got a lot worse this season. I don't know if it was a culture problem, I don't know if he was hurt, I really have no idea, but Donovan Smith was extremely disappointing and lost whatever draft stock he had. I guess it is official that he did declare for the 2025 draft, but I'm not even sure if he's really going to get much of an opportunity, if at all, to even get invited to a practice squad. There's pretty much no way he gets invited to the combine, but maybe he'll end up in one of those spring leagues. Part of this can be blamed on Houston's poor pass protection, and I think overall just something was off in the locker room. They couldn't quite figure it out, receivers weren't on the same page, and after things got worse and worse, his confidence was just shot. As I said, he was eventually benched, and this is really sad. I do hope that Smith ends up finding his way into the spring leagues and maybe gets an outside shot at an NFL free agent camp, but I'm not quite sure it'll happen. I always thought the first round stuff was a little bit of a stretch to begin with, but this is a guy who worked hard, tried his best during his time, and definitely had his moments. I'll be rooting for Donovan Smith in the future, and I hope things all turn out well for him. But what do you guys think? If you're a Houston fan, what happened with Donovan Smith this past season, and what is the future of Houston football? Also, give me another player who had a disappointing 2024 season that I could take a look at next. And before you go, don't forget to also leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out all of the videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.